Hello and welcome back to Empire of the Cops podcast. It is the Empire of the Empire of the Cop Insider with Neil Jones every single Monday. Neil, lovely to see you again, and quite the game against Aston Villa. I think the most interesting thing I found, after the match was sort of Klopp talking about Liverpool sort of coming close to perfection. So in his words, he said, the mix and possession between control and defence was close to perfect. I think, do you share those thoughts?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, listen, you can pick holes in any performance, and you can look and say that they should have scored, or they should have scored more, or they should have, defended a bit better in certain situations. But I think if you're looking at what Liverpool have done in the first few weeks of the season, we've been calling out for them to be more robust. We've been calling out for them to be more solid and to give up fewer chances and to have more control of games and to be more clinical. And yeah, all of those factors were in evidence, definitely. And I think the biggest thing I suppose you'd take would be the contrast between the way they started the Bournemouth game and the way they started the Villa game. They were so much more at it from the first whistle against Villa, and they were so much more sort of composed, kept the ball well, defended well, pressed the ball, won their battles, and yeah, it was I think Klopp said, didn't he? He said, the weather, the atmosphere, the results, the start of the season. If it wasn't for Trent Alexander-Arnold's hamstring injury, there would have been a perfect Sunday, and I'd go along with that.
There's a few of the men in the red shirt that we really need to sort of talk about. We will get to Joe Gomez, who I believe you said on X yesterday he had probably his best game for Liverpool in quite a while. I'm going to start off with Darwin Nunez. Purely, I was covering the game for Empire yesterday, and there were just stages throughout the game I couldn't quite believe my ears at the commentary. There was a lot of inevitable sort of mickey taking around sort of missed chances, but seemingly little in the way of acknowledgement in terms of how he actually genuinely impacted the game before his substitution. Creating chances, setting up Mo's goal, just generally being a nuisance. I think you can argue he was perhaps a little unfortunate. Certainly that sort of chipped effort to Martinez, I think it could have easily ended the game with potentially 2, maybe 3 goals. I don't know. Did you feel the same, or did you feel the criticism was sort of warranted or sort of balanced?
No, he didn't deserve criticism for his performance yesterday. He led the line in a team that won 3-0, and he was involved in all 3 goals. So no, I don't see where the criticism comes. Listen, we want him to put the chances away, and that was one of the big things about the Newcastle game, wasn't it? That when the chances came, he was clinical. He needed to be in that game because Liverpool were obviously behind, and it was a really tight game. In this game, yeah, you want to see him sort of build on that and put the ball in the net, but he was unlucky. I mean, he had five shots. I saw that he didn't have one on target, but he definitely did. I mean, one hit Ezri Konsa in the square in the face, and I'm pretty sure that was going on target and probably going into the far corner. So he definitely influenced the game. And I think if you look at the way Liverpool had success in the game going forward, it was through the wide areas and through, getting in between. I mean, the system changed for Villa, but it's either the wing back or the full back and the centre back. They got a lot of success, particularly down the Villa left with Lucas Digne and Pau Torres, and you looked at how much trouble Nunez and Salah caused in that regard. So look, I mean, he'll be disappointed he didn't put one of the chances away. But I think if you look at his first start of the season and what Klopp's been asking him to do, Klopp's been asking him to do all the off the ball work, to press from the front, to be a nuisance, to run in behind, to link with teammates. He did it pretty well, didn't he? He's still got areas to tidy up in terms of his touch. I think he can still be a little bit cleaner with his layoffs and his first touch and his link up. But I think really, there just seems to be a little bit of a, maybe it's the price tag, I suppose, but he's held to a lot higher standards, I think, than other players. I'm pretty sure, there wouldn't have been the same reaction to Nicholas Jackson, for example, in the Chelsea game. And I think you'd have to say Darwin Nunez had a bigger impact on Liverpool's game than Jackson did on Chelsea.
No, absolutely. I think one man, I think pretty much everyone is in agreement over would be Dominik Szoboszlai. We have to talk about in a long-range goal in the opening 3 minutes to open the scoring, really set the tone for the rest of the game, always running about the pitch, making a nuisance of himself. I think Klopp again sort of applauded his tactical understanding after the game and made note of the fact that he's absolutely ready for the dirty part of the game. There's plenty of good things to say about him. I'd love to hear, certainly what you made of his performance, his goal scoring performance at Anfield.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the one thing that's we've known is to come, isn't it? We from a very encouraging first 3 games, we've seen all the good bits that you mentioned there in terms of his ability to do the ugly side of the game, his ability to run and to win battles and to fight for possession and to battle for his teammates. And we thought, well, there was a couple of times where he could have pulled the trigger in games, and you thought, oh, you really wanted to back himself. Well, one drop to him there on his weak foot, and it's a really tough one to hit. I had a similar view to Jürgen, albeit a fair few rows behind, and it was in from the moment it left his boot. Brilliant technique, reminded me a little bit of Thiago against Porto, was it a couple of years ago in the Champions League? Yes. That kind of sort of pure strike, and that's clearly what he's got in his locker, isn't he? He's full of confidence. He's obviously really enjoying himself since he's moved. He's playing with a bit of swagger, isn't he? And you can see that the fans really have responded to him well, and I think that comes as much from listen, we all love players who come and show their skills and their tricks and their quality. But I think what really gets fans on side is when you see that mix with the other side of the game. And to be honest, his impact reminds me a little bit. It's a different type of player and different, obviously, era. But his impact reminds me a little bit of sort of Xabi Alonso when he came to Liverpool in 2004. And sort of his first couple of games, it just felt like he took the team up a level with everything he'd done. He passed the ball a bit sharper. He snapped into tackles a bit stronger. And he just seemed like, it didn't take long for people to realise, oh, God, we've got a class player. And I think it's very similar with Szoboszlai. You can just see that he's really in tune with what Liverpool need, what Anfield likes, and what Jurgen Klopp wants from him. And keep him fit, keep him firing. There'll be some bumps to come in the road, I'm sure. There'll be some tough away games and things like that lying ahead. But you look at him at 22, and you look at the sort of money Liverpool have paid for him. I think you have to say they've got a real good one there.
It does look a snip. Even now, sort of at £60 million, doesn't it? I mean, we talked about it being almost sort of a perfect day, lovely weather. I think Klopp mentioned afterwards. But there was obviously one event that you've already touched upon that marred the event perhaps slightly, which is, of course, Trent's injury. He didn't seem particularly bothered. I think Klopp mentioned afterwards, he said, oh, it's hamstring, but it doesn't seem that bad. But obviously, the scans are going to take place, which will reveal the sort of exact severity. I don't know if there's been any sort of further information that you've been hearing on your end regarding that in terms of severity, anything that sort of the club are feeling in that regard?
No, what I would say is I wouldn't take any notice of Jürgen saying in a press conference that he doesn't think it's serious. I mean, we've learned that from down the years, really, that he says that quite a lot, and then we don't see players for 6 weeks. I've lost count of the amount of times he said, he's got a slight muscle thing. He might have a chance this week, and we're waiting. With Trent, I think obviously the good news, I suppose, is that there's no game for a couple of weeks for Liverpool. He's obviously got England coming up. I'd be amazed if he joins up with England, given that he's limped out of a Premier League game, on the Sunday. So I think they might have to do without their number 10, England. But that gives Liverpool some time, obviously, to get him ready for Wolves. They've got 16th of September, isn't it? That they play Wolves. So I think that will play into Liverpool's hands. They don't want to take any risks with them, do they? They don't. The last thing they need really is to lose any player, but Trent in particular. They don't have natural right back cover, and even if you do have natural right back cover, you don't have cover for Trent Alexander-Arnold. The things that he can do. I thought he was excellent yesterday, actually, as well. I thought he, some of his passing. You see the pass he plays for the second goal up to Salah. From that sort of quarterback position, but there was a couple that he hit from the right back position out to Luis Diaz, which just got Liverpool really sort of up there. And you can see almost a few other players. They look at the diagonal, they look at that ball out to Salah, and they think, no, there's no point in me hitting it. You saw McAllister do it a couple of times. There's almost no point in me hitting it. We'll wait and we'll work it and we'll get it to Trent and we'll let him hit it because he hits it the best. And you can see that importance that he's got in the team, and proud day for him, of course, leading his boyhood side out at Anfield. What a moment that was. Shame it ended prematurely, but I think he, as long as it's not a serious injury, I think even he would be quite pleased to have been able to give another young lad his debut at Anfield. You know, Jarell Kwanzaa coming on for the last 20 minutes or so. Looks very assured, doesn't he? You know, I think he's had a couple of sub appearances. It's early days, but he's not put a foot wrong in them, and good on him. You know, that's another good sign for the academy. It was a pretty good weekend for Liverpool's academy at Kirkby, with 2 players in the first team squad, with Jarell coming off the bench, and with Kate Gordon, of course, making a return as well to action. We can talk about that a bit later, but I think it was a good weekend for Kirkby, despite the 21s getting beat.
No, absolutely. It's certainly nice to see the young lads get a run out as well. You know, I think you're spot on there. It was assured performances. Obviously, I think Liverpool don't want to be in a position where we're sort of going again as we did. My concern would be sort of last season, you know, even absolutely adoring Stefan Bajcetic's performances. We don't want to get to a stage where we're sort of going, young lad, can you do this for 10, 20 games on the trot? And then you're injured, your development's hurt, and it just, I think ideally we shouldn't be in that position. It takes me really to my next consideration, because I suppose there's 2 problems here for Liverpool. As you've rightly pointed out, Liverpool really don't have a substitute for that level of creativity in terms of Trent's position. But how else would we even address a vaguely serious injury? I suppose the obvious solution would be put Gomez into that right back position, but then you're saying, well, you probably then do need to bring in Kwanzaa to come in alongside Matip, or alternatively, I know Otero Endo has played as a centre back before.
Konate's back fit for the Wolves game, and hopefully, and Van Dijk. We don't know yet what his extra ban is. Obviously, it could just be could be one game, could be no games. It won't be, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it isn't disastrous, but it's obviously what it does mean is, if you get another injury, then it sort of compounds, doesn't it? And you're moving Gomez. And the other thing, I suppose, is you're moving Gomez at a time when Gomez had a good game and has had 2 good games at centre back, really. So it's not ideal. Hopefully, it's not a long term. And I think one thing that does stand out a little bit from Liverpool, and Trent will be very much influenced by James Milner. And Jordan Henderson, you know, down the years, but Jurgen got into a really good rhythm with them, where players, as soon as they felt the first thing, they didn't take any risk with it. They just sit down and sort of say, "No, I'm coming, you know, get me off," type of thing. I'm not going to let this turn into a grade 2 or whatever, or you know, a more serious issue. Hopefully, Trent's done that and caught it early. The game was won, remember, so you know, it's a lot easier to sort of to walk off, isn't it? Maybe it's less tempted to play on. And obviously, you've got that international break. So if it is just the lowest or the least severe muscle injury, then you should be ready for the Wolves game, or at the very least the next game after that. So it isn't the worst time to get an injury, but yeah, we don't want too many of them. And like you say, you don't want to be put in a position where you're skipping through the levels with a young player and asking, you know, Jarell Kwanzaa to step up. Some players can do it. You know, Trent was one, wasn't he, who was able to do it. Stefan Bajcetic, I think, did it last season, but you don't want to be doing it too often, because you know it's not the sort of the standard way for a young player to come in the first team.
No, absolutely. I do really also want to touch on sort of the younger lads as well, but I think it's important to sort of, I suppose, we take a moment to reflect as well on the sort of the window that's just gone. I think both of our positions on the matter were pretty much consistent, much as the rest of sort of the Liverpool fan base, much as the rest of sort of fellow Liverpool journalists. Liverpool needed a left-sided centre-back before the window closed. We hoped we would get one. We didn't, but we did bring in a 4th midfielder in Ryan Gravenberch from Bayern Munich. With that in mind, how would you assess Liverpool's window?
Yeah, I think it was tough, turbulent. You know, a lot of the things that happened there, you know, you wouldn't have anticipated at the start. You know, we knew we were losing players on free transfers in James Milner, obviously Roberto Firmino, Naby Keita, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. And I thought there might have been some more departures, but probably the players who did depart, I didn't think it'd be them. I thought it'd be maybe Joel Matip, maybe Thiago. And I'm looking and seeing Jordan Henderson and Fabinho leaving, and obviously it's a big upheaval. But I think you look at Liverpool now when they've come out of it. I really do think this. I don't think that they're far away from having a very, very good squad. Obviously it depends on what the players do, but in terms of talent and in terms of sort of the balance of options, they're probably one they're probably how can I put this? If Endo's brilliant or as good as people say he is, then they're fine in the midfield option. They're probably, if not, they're probably one sort of Fabinho away, aren't they? You know, and a centre back. I would suggest in terms of squad, or even just a versatile defender away. It's not too far, and they were a lot further away when the window started. You know, they were looking at the team at the back end of last season, thinking, "Oof, this is problems, isn't it? You know, things need addressing. They need X amount of signings. They do this. The fact that they bought 4 midfielders tells you just how sort of obvious the problems were at times last season. And I think the fact that they've bought in 3, 24, 22 and 21 gives you a lot of hope that they're sort of building something for the long term. And, add in Curtis Jones, add in Harvey Elliott, add in Bajcetic to that. You've got, and then look at the forward line, and you've got the sort of the makings of a really strong sort of squad over the next 4 or 5 years, haven't you? And I think, if they can get back to that position where it's just tweaks as opposed to a complete overhaul needed in transfer windows, then we've seen that Liverpool are quite good at making those tweaks. They're quite good at sort of, getting the next forward in when one's coming to the end of the contract, or replacing someone who's getting into their 30s and that kind of thing. So it's just getting back and making sure that the business that they've done gets them to a certain level, and then they continue to do that kind of business. Because I think what they've done in the past potentially is just looked after one area and not fixed the other. And I think they maybe done that a little bit this summer with the centre back situation. But when you watch Joe Matip and Joe Gomez play like that on Sunday, you sort of think, well, maybe we got it wrong. But I still think, they're probably one defender short, and then they're banking a lot on Endo being, a passable replacement for Fabinho, which he might well be, but I think the Jordan's still out, obviously.
No, I'd agree with you on the centre-back situation, and we're going to discuss that, I do promise. I just want to touch quickly on Gravenberch specifically, because there has been, Liverpool have obviously had in mind initially a specialist holding midfielder. They brought in Wataru Endo, who I think some assumed might be playing more of a bit part role this season. Perhaps looks more the case that he will be playing a fair bit more than many perhaps realised. There's some concern in terms of what Gravenberch offers towards the defensive side of Liverpool's game. We all remember the video with Klopp meeting Endo for the first time and sort of saying, to paraphrase, we're very top heavy, we very much need you and what you offer in this side. And I suppose my concern is, because if does it feel like we do feel very sort of front heavy at the moment, or do you feel that Gravenberch has been sort of brought in as that long term option that Klopp can mould into sort of holding midfielder? I was watching, I think it was an Analysing Anfield episode with Josh Williams for the Echo, and he was sort of making the point that if you actually look at the stats around the player, if you've watched the player, he can be played there, but he's not. I think he was saying that a lot of people get stuck on his frame and think, well, he's got the perfect frame for a holding midfielder, the perfect height for a holding midfielder, but his attributes aren't specifically suited for that. I don't know if you share the same opinion, or if you're a bit more sort of positive about the situation.
Yeah, I'm definitely more positive than you. You sound like you're devastated that Liverpool signed a 21-year-old.
Oh, I'm delighted. I'm delighted.
I mean, I think we get caught up in the idea of what went before, don't we? So you look and say, well, God, Fabinho's gone, so we need Fabinho to play. You don't. You need someone who's good at football and he can win battles and he can control the ball and keep it. And look at Liverpool's 3 in midfield yesterday. Listen, it didn't work out bad. They had Alexis McAllister, Curtis Jones and Dominik Szoboszlai. Now, you used your phrase, top heavy. Probably is quite top heavy, isn't it, in terms of what they're all good at? But they were able to work together. They were able to do it against a good side as well. And Villa, Villa had two holders in the side and had nowhere near the same level of control or solidity about them. So it's not a question of it needs to be someone who flies into tackles or is 6'4" and wins headers for fun. It's about attributes. And if you look at Gravenberch, what he's got, I agree. I wouldn't have him at the base of a midfield, or naturally anyway. He wouldn't look to me like someone who plays as a lone. What was the phrase that Pep Lijnders used about Fabinho, a lighthouse, because he likes to carry with the ball, doesn't he? He likes players close to him. Really, it looks like he likes to glide past people as opposed to just those kind of sort of 5-10 yard passes that we associated with Fabinho at his best. But you look at the options that Jurgen's got now. You've got they're all good on the ball. They're all young, apart from Endo, who listen. We talk about Endo as if he's sort of playing veterans football. He's 30. He's not. He's younger than two of the people he's coming in to replace, isn't he, in the squad, and not much older than the other one. So, he's definitely still capable of getting about the pitch and playing that way. But it's just what it gives is just flexibility around it, isn't it? It means you can play. You might play McAllister as a 6, and you might have Curtis and Gravenberch either side, or you might have Szoboszlai and Gravenberch or whoever. You might play Curtis as a 6. We've seen him do that for England in the Euros. He had a game yesterday, I think, where it was a sort of very much a back up to speed kind of game. It was very unspectacular, very sort of neat and tidy, and not much else. But he's capable of doing that. Better things in the Premier League, was he shown last season. You've got obviously Bajcetic still to come in. You've still got Thiago there, and I know we might be waiting forever for Thiago to get back to fitness, or it feels like we are, but he's still there and he's still capable of playing really well. So I think Liverpool have just got. They probably have to figure out exactly what it looks like, but I think it looks a little bit to me like what it did on Sunday. It just looks like three good players in there, who can run, who can cover the ground, and who can all do a little bit of everything in terms of moving the ball forwards, in terms of controlling the ball, controlling the tempo of the game, and winning duels when they have to. And the more that they play, and the more that they play these systems, and the more games that they do play, the easier that'll become. Remember, it took a while for Fabinho to become what he was. It took a while for Jordan Henderson to find a real sort of settled role in Liverpool's team. It took a while, for Gini Wijnaldum, or it took a while. It took a change for Gini Wijnaldum to sort of become that. He wasn't signed as what he became for Liverpool. So, yeah, I'm pretty positive about it. I think Gravenberch's got a lot to prove on an individual basis. He's failed, hasn't he, in his first sort of big move away from Ajax, and he won't want to fail again. So I think using that hunger in a positive way would be good for Liverpool. And I think just in terms of his raw talent and skills and abilities, I think he's a really exciting addition. I really do. And, credit to Liverpool for getting it done, because I think it would have been easy, wouldn't it, to sort of look and say, we signed 3 midfielders, we've got these players coming back. Let's not sort of go too big into it. They've actually gone, no, this is a player we like. This is a player who's available now when we didn't think he would be. Let's do it. And I think we've been quite keen to see them do these kind of things, haven't they? Sort of double lock the door, if you want to use an old phrase.
No, absolutely. I think the important thing to consider as well is how Bayern would have liked to have used him, how Liverpool will use him, are two very completely different sort of scenarios. With Bayern with the double pivot and Liverpool with 3 midfielders, it's a very, very different situation. And I think, I suppose you look at sort of Tuchel thinking, well, the problem is at Bayern is it was very much the case of you kind of need to succeed now, isn't it? It's not the case where at Liverpool where you look at, well, no problem, we'll give you your time, we'll slowly filter you in, and you can grow at your own pace. I struggle to see a world in which Gravenberch doesn't succeed in comparison to his time at Bayern, because he will be given the time to sort of realise his full potential. I think my honest reaction, I think when initially signed him, was kind of, but I don't know, maybe many will disagree, but I'm bizarrely most excited by his signing compared to Szoboszlai, compared to McAllister, certainly most compared to Endo, even though we've seen, certainly McAllister, Szoboszlai have looked phenomenal so far early in their Liverpool careers. Long may that continue. I suppose I'm more convinced by the ceiling on him, sort of more than anything else. I'm putting a lot of stock into the future, but I do think if Liverpool can realise that potential, they've probably got, not to suggest that McAllister or Szoboszlai don't have that kind of ceiling, but I think they could really get a really sort of special player out of him. But
I think Szoboszlai. I mean, what we've seen of Szoboszlai earlier, I think his ceiling looks pretty high, doesn't it? In terms of, I think he's obviously you know what you're sort of getting a little bit because you watch Leipzig and you watch games and stuff like that. But I do think Szoboszlai surprised a few people in terms of just how ready for Premier League football he looks, isn't he? And I think maybe you might see Gravenberch take a little bit of time. Look, never mind style-wise or whatever, but just he hasn't played a lot of football, has he, for 12 months? He's barely, getting the rhythm of starting games. We might see him eased in the Europa League, for example. You might see him sort of coming in those games, and the draw was quite kind in that sense, wasn't it, for Liverpool? I think it wasn't. There's no games in there where you sort of look and think, oh, that's a tough away trip or whatever. You're sort of looking and thinking, okay, they're quite standard Europa League group games, aren't they? Austria, Belgium, France. They're not even a great deal of travel for them. So I think
it might be worse, couldn't it?
Well, I looked. I was when the pots were obviously, they were going through the pots. I was looking, and you have that sort of fingers crossed, don't you? And you look at Brighton's group. Brighton's group could have been a Champions League group, couldn't they? In terms of what they got. So yeah, Liverpool did okay out of that draw. And I think for people like Gravenberch, I think for Endo as well, I think it'll be good giving them games. Just where they're going to get 90 minutes or they're going to get 70 minutes. It's not going to be sort of quite as listen, it's still they still want to win the games. They still need to win the games, but it's not going to be quite as sort of intense as the Premier League, where listen, doesn't matter if you're 17th in the Premier League, second in the Premier League, or whatever. The intensity is always there, isn't it? You saw that even look at when Bournemouth came to Anfield. There was still that sort of element of jeopardy there. You look at Forest going to Chelsea and beating them on the weekend. So, excuse me. There's I think that'll be a crucial month, really. I think September with the Europa League start and getting back after the international break. Obviously, hopefully a good bit of training for these players, settling into the squad. Then you've got obviously a few others as well. Maybe Tsimikas, Bento. Whoever's not playing in the front three. So Gakpo on the bench, Jota's been on the bench. You're able to get rhythm into these players. But I think with Gravenberch, I think it's what he could be. Definitely that is most exciting about Liverpool than maybe what he has been. I think it's sort of just look at the sort of the tools that are there ready to be used, and there's a lot of them.
No, absolutely. I think you're right to point out as well the relative sort of challenge of the Europa League, and certainly I think many have sort of pointed out, after we come back from the international break and play Wolves, we play like 3 games in 6 days. I think it's last West Ham and then Leicester in the Leicester in the cup. So, but then I do wonder whether, and it seems bizarre to say it because obviously we'd all rather Liverpool be in the Champions League, be playing absolute premier European football. But I do wonder, given the unique circumstances we're in, whether almost being in the Europa League is almost better for Liverpool. I know that sounds ridiculous to say, but you look at certainly that fixture list and you think, well, not that it's a throwaway game. It's still European standard to a certain degree, but you think even if you make a few changes there, you don't look at that and think, oh, well, if Liverpool put in Harvey Elliott and Curtis Jones and maybe give Ben Doak a start, you don't look at that and think, oh, this could be a close one. You think, well, that's enough quality there to still, to hopefully win all 3 points in the group stage. But yeah, I think. I don't know. I think when we look back on it, I think we won't necessarily think, being in the Europa League was the worst thing for us. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, I think what also as well is there's a lot of players here, isn't there? I mean, listen, there's a lot of players who've achieved an awful lot in the game with Liverpool, most of them. But there are also players who I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to have that. Can you qualify for the Champions League or can you win the Europa League sort of carrot there, as opposed to you have to deliver in the Champions League every single week. That's the next step for people like Curtis Jones, for Harvey Elliott, for, like you say, for Bento, probably for people like Ryan Gravenberch, for Szoboszlai, for, to a lesser extent, Kanate, younger players who are very, very good players, but probably aren't yet at that level of, McAllister, another one, obviously. So I don't necessarily think if it's only for 1 year, obviously, and we all hope it's only for 1 year. I don't necessarily think it's a terrible thing to have that sort of carrot of, listen, go and stamp your authority on the Europa League a little bit in a different way, but a little bit like the under-21s with Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott, where it's like, well, okay, look, you're a really good player, but listen, that's where you should be shining, then, isn't it? You should be going and dominating that tournament. There's a bit like that, isn't it, now with the Europa League? It's like, okay, well, especially in the group stage, can you go and really sort of impress home just how good you are, just how much you deserve this chance, and just how hungry you are to take Liverpool back to the Champions League, back to the big time. And they've got a good, listen, as long as you stay fit, we keep saying this, don't we? Stay fit. But they've got a pretty good second string. That team for Leicester, I think on in the Carabao wins that a couple of weeks' time, 3 weeks' time probably. That could be a really interesting side to watch. You're looking at Bendo. You could have Darwin potentially. You could be in that side. You'll have Gravenberch, Endo, maybe Bobby Clark, people like that. Kate Gordon back fit playing. There's just a lot of exciting sort of players there that you think, come on, let's sort of. I could really get behind them as a sort of to watch them and see if they can develop. There's a lot of potential in the Liverpool side. They've still got to prove it. They really have. But yeah, in terms of talent, I'd love to watch a training session of this Liverpool team because they've got a lot of very technically accomplished footballers now. And I imagine if you're getting in the middle in the rondos, I imagine you're struggling to get that ball out because there's not a lot of there's a lot of mugs, is there, who can't play 1 and 2 touch.
I mean, it's good that Liverpool have got some young legs back in midfield now. So it certainly should help with that. I mean, you've touched on Kylie Gordon's return. I do want to touch on the younger lads, certainly because it does seem that Liverpool's academy is producing some absolute belters of late. Certainly, young Joel Quansah made his home debut. Was lovely to see. I think, as you mentioned earlier in this talk, he's yet to put a foot wrong. And whilst I would temper that in terms of our expectations, in terms of it's very important that he is given these little cameos here and there rather than trusted, to having the full weight of the back line and that responsibility on his shoulders at such a young age. It is promising to see these performances. It is promising to see these cameos. And what are your sort of current thoughts on sort of the makeup of the academy and the lads that you are seeing coming through, Kylie Gordon's return? Is it looking sort of very promising?
I think so. I mean, listen, I'm always glass half full with younger players, and I watch a lot of the academy. I speak to a lot of people at the academy. I've got good relationships with a lot of the players and their families and things like that. So I am a little bit biased. I always see the good side in younger players, as opposed to sort of the cynical element where a lot of people say, we won't hear from him in a couple of years' time, that kind of stuff. And I understand that because, let's be fair, the level required to get into Liverpool's team has changed dramatically, hasn't it? You think back and think about if Ben Doak was coming through in sort of maybe even the Benitez era, the Hodgson era, certainly in the dark. But that if he was coming through at that stage, he would be starting games in the Premier League. I think Ben Doak that stage. You look at, but there are other players there who are very, very good players. And I think they're going to have Premier League careers, but they're obviously, they have to be so good to get in Liverpool's squad at the moment. And you look, Tyler Morton's gone out on loan to Hull. I think that's a good move for him. I think he needs that, but I think if he's a good player, he might not be at the level Liverpool require, but I think he'll be a Premier League midfielder if he can stay fit and get a bit of luck with injuries. You look at Bobby Clark. I think a lot of people thought he might go on loan. I think he might have wanted to go on loan at one point, but he stayed. I think he's a really good player, 18 years of age. Callum Scanlon, we saw in pre-season, doing really well. A young left back with bags of energy, talent, physicality, class on the ball. I think he's definitely one to keep an eye on for the long term. I say Doak was signed in. Scanlon was signed in as well. You've got obviously Bajcetic, who spent a bit of time in the academy and has already stepped up. So there's lots and lots to sort of be excited about. In terms of Quansah, I fully agree with you on he hasn't put a foot wrong, but two, obviously you don't want to have him running before he can walk. But if I compare him to sort of, this isn't to cast or to denigrate anyone else, but if I compare him to when Rhys Williams came into the first team, Rhys Williams was always a good size, but I think Rhys Williams, you could see when he came into the first team, he wasn't yet a man in terms of his physicality. He was over promoted, and he did well. Rhys Williams had some really good games, and he really, really gave everything he had. But you could see that it was a level that was just a bit high for him in terms of his body. He couldn't move his feet maybe as quickly, or he didn't have the balance, or he didn't have the sort of the confidence in his frame at that stage. He was still sort of raw and still very young. I think you look at Quansah and he looks like a man to me. He looks like he's big and he's strong. He looks like he's happy to do the battles. He doesn't mind getting up for a header. He's obviously he's good on the ball. Every academy player is good on the ball, but I think that obviously the trick to the position, a little bit like goalkeeping, is just your decision making, isn't it? And it's sort of those really imperceptible sort of movements of being in the right position to clear a ball at the near post, or not letting a centre forward spin you or get away from you just in the penalty area. Those things can only come with experience. They can only come with game time, with coaching, and with time. So he's going in the right direction. He's got a lot to work with, but it'll take a while before Jarell Quansah is what he's going to be, and whether that's a Liverpool centre back, a Premier League centre back, or less or more, we don't know. But he's going in the right direction, and good on him. He's taken his chance in pre-season, hasn't he? A few players got chances. He got one. Bendo took his chance. I think Bobby Clark took his chance when he played. Callum Scanlon definitely did. James McConnell as well. So there's been a lot of positivity around the academy, and to obviously to feed into that, obviously seeing Kate Gordon back on Sunday, 19 months out with a pelvis injury, coming back, that must be a long old road for a young lad, especially a young lad who was on such a high when he got the injury. He just played in a Carabao Cup semi-final at the Emirates. He just scored in the FA Cup at Anfield. He was around the first team squad and really going in the right direction. So to go from that to being out of the game for, a year and a half more, it's just a huge blow. But credit to him, he's come back. By all accounts, he's been absolutely brilliant in terms of his attitude, his application, his work, in the gym and wherever with the fitness coaches. And that on Sunday will have been. I know there'll have been a lot of people who'd be very emotional at the academy, and I know his family definitely would have been. To see him back on the field and playing, and fingers crossed, we see him now more and more regularly as the weeks go on.
It's what we want to see at large, isn't it? I think. Listen. We all love to see a transfer. It gets us all excited. But I think the messaging from the coaching staff has been pretty consistent. If they can, they would rather use the solutions that are readily available in the squad, in the academy. I'm sure if you ask Klopp, would you rather buy a player or develop one from the academy? I think he'd probably rather you coach a player, which is absolutely fair enough. So it's brilliant to see all these young players sort of coming through, Kylie Gordon coming back from injury. It's just great to see them just developing and just thinking of what kind of future they might have at Liverpool. And speaking of the future of Liverpool, there is one sort of larger issue I did want to touch on with you, which is really the sporting director role. The window's closed. Schmadtke's already talked about the future in the sense of he's kind of said, there will be a meeting with the Liverpool hierarchy now that the window's closed to discuss whether it is just a 3-month relationship or looking at something more longer term. I mean, for me, it's absolutely critical we kind of come to a decision on this quite soon. I mean, I don't want to be the person that's always looking ahead to a window, but I do think, and we've discussed this before, next year, you're looking at Salah's contract, it's going to be a year left in it. Liverpool are going to have a big decision on this, and perhaps an even bigger decision on whether to sell Mo Salah is who you're going to replace him with. I think we have a rough idea of the kind of profile we'd look for: left-footed, quick output merchants. But saying that and finding that are two very sort of completely different things. I think the important thing, first and foremost, is that we're very much united in the vision that we have sort of moving forward. I think Liverpool certainly functioned well when we had Michael Edwards at the helm, and I could rely on that consistency. But of late we've had lots of turmoil, lots of change. Edwards, the war. Schmadtke. So I guess my question to you is what have you heard anything happening on that front, and when we can expect this meeting to occur? And do you get the impression from inside the club whether they feel that Schmadtke is a long-term reliable solution?
No, I don't get that. I don't get that impression. Otherwise, I think he'd have been on a 4-year contract, wouldn't he, or a 3-year contract. So obviously there was an element, and I don't think it was necessarily all Liverpool. I think there was an element of doubt on Schmadtke's part as well. Don't forget, he had retired from football, in what was it, February. So he was clearly planning for, life after football, and then this has come up. So I think there was a degree of sort of, a marriage of convenience about the arrangement. I think the quotes that again thrown around from an old interview. I think that was sort of the start of August as opposed to more recently. So I don't think it was a case of Schmadtke saying, listen, Saturday we're having a sit down. I think it was a bit more kind of looking ahead, and clearly there needs to be some sort of arrangement or some sort of agreement made in terms of what it looks like. I mean, Liverpool were, I think you would have expected Liverpool to appoint someone more high profile or sort of more, more longer term in that role once Julian Ward made it clear. And let's be fair, he gave Liverpool plenty of notice that he was leaving, and they had plenty of time to sort of line someone up. The fact that they ended up with Schmadtke suggests either they weren't able to get the person that they want, or that they didn't like the sort of the candidates or the the people who were out there at that time. Whether that changes, whether it was someone who was in a job and maybe needed to work some notice period and some gardening leave and that kind of thing, possibly. But yeah, you're right. By the time you get around to January, you're already looking, aren't you, that fingers crossed, things have gone well on the pitch and there's no great injury crisis and things like that. But you're looking at Liverpool, okay, can you start to sort of do that tweaking that I was talking about earlier? Can you start to look at, okay, can you start to get the next left back in, for the future? Is it someone from the academy? Is it, are you going to try and get that left-sided centre-back that we think Liverpool need? Are you going to start lining up Salah replacements? Are you going to open negotiations with Salah over the contract? I mean, I wouldn't advise it at the moment in terms of the numbers that are getting thrown around by Saudi Arabia. I think that would be a difficult conversation. But there's a lot of things that need doing. You've obviously got some more big players out of contract coming up. You've got Trent, 2 years left, or less than 2 years left now, so that's going to need doing. So there's a lot of stuff that needs sorting. And yet it would be helpful to have someone there who's going to be there for the long term, and someone who's sort of, able to provide a little bit of stability. I don't necessarily see Schmadtke as that guy in terms of, the next 2 or 3 years. I see him far more as a sort of I would say an emergency plan, but a short-term plan. And time will tell, won't it? But he hasn't. I don't think you'd say that the worst window. He might have had the most turbulence and the most difficult, but I don't think he's had the worst. If they get to the end of the Saudi window and Salah's still a Liverpool player, which I think he will be.
No, absolutely. Time will most certainly tell, and I think in the meantime, I don't think it's. I don't think the klaxons and sirens will be going off just yet. I think 10 points is it from 12 we're at now, which is I think if you'd offered that to me at the start of the season, I'd have absolutely bit your hand off. Given the quality of the opposition, I think especially. I think facing Aston Villa, I was expecting a sort of much tighter game than that. But the control we showed was absolutely remarkable. To be honest, I think Liverpool will take that going into the international break, and sort of hopefully that will reinvigorate us and for the rest of the season, really, won't it?
Yeah, well, look at the sort of people who finished above Liverpool last season. Look at Manchester United yesterday. Look at Newcastle on Saturday. Both Newcastle lost 3 in a row. Manchester United have already struggled this season. So, last season Liverpool suffered because they couldn't get any momentum going early in the season. They were behind the 8 ball, as I wrote this morning, and they never ever got really out of that. I don't think they were ever in the top 4. I might be wrong at any point last season. This season it's different. They've got some momentum. They've got something to build on. They've got a platform. It's only 4 games. They've got some work to do. They've got some tough ones. The next 2 away games, I think, it's Tottenham and Brighton in the Premier League. So they're going to be tough ones, and they might be actually the two sides that almost take over from Manchester United and Newcastle as being the big challenges for the top 4. Given what we've seen so far. So it's a big test to come, but all you can do is get the results, isn't it, and start to ease yourself in. And we've seen with this Liverpool side, or with previous Liverpool sides, and with this manager, that if you do get a platform and you do get on a roll, Liverpool are pretty good at making sure that it's not a false dawn. It's sort of it turns into something pretty tangible as the season goes on. So fingers crossed, eh?
Absolutely. One game at a time and one podcast at a time, every single week on a Monday. Neil, you've been an absolute pleasure to have on, as always. If you've been watching this, I'm sure you already know by now where you can catch all of Neil's stuff on his Substack with Covering Liverpool at neilj.substack.com. And of course, you are on X or Twitter, as we all fondly remember, at Neil Jones Goal. If you've been watching this from Empire's perspective, of course, you can catch us on the YouTube. Give us a comment, like, and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. And you can also find this in audio form and in written form on our Substack at empireofthecop.substack.com. Thanks again for watching. This has been Empire of the Cop Insider with Neil Jones. I've been your host, Farrell Keeling. Take care.